no turning back, no turning back. Will you decide now to follow Jesus? Will you decide now to follow Jesus? Will you decide now to follow Jesus? No turning back, no turning back.
Voices One. I have decided to follow Jesus.
You're listening to Affirm Southern Gospel Radio.
Stand by. What you hear in the next half hour could have a profound impact on your life.
Or it could just brighten your day a little.
This is Affirm Southern Gospel Radio.
There are things in every journey that can break us. There are burdens that can bring us to our knees. But it's in those moments when our faith feels weakest that we simply stand our ground and just believe. Pray now, right here in the storm, He's still the same. Pray now, there is strength and power in Jesus' name, so pray now. Oh, the silence doesn't mean that He's not listening, and the darkness doesn't mean that He is gone, 'cause He promised He would never ever leave us, and you've never spent one moment on your own. So pray now, right here in the storm, He's still the same. Pray now, there is strength and power in Jesus' name, so pray now.
Good morning, everybody. Mike, that must be on. Y'all hear me? All right, everybody, it's time to get started. Give everybody a chance to get settled in. Say good morning to everybody. Nice to be here. Had a beautiful weekend yesterday anyway. Today not so much, but hey, we'll take what we get, right? All right, it's nice to see everybody this morning. Let's go ahead before we start Sunday school and let's go to prayer. And I'll ask anybody anywhere if you got a spoken request. All right, Steve.
Well, remember Linda this morning. She had her surgery. She's home recovering, sore and stiff, but doing well. And just remember our family.
All right. Ruby. Somebody else?
I'd still like everybody to remember my grandson Jackson. He did get to come home from the hospital yesterday, but he still has that blood clot in his brain. They've got him on blood thinners to dissolve it, but he's got a good little road ahead of him.
All right. Kurt?
Keep my cousin's little girl in your prayers. She's the one that's going to have her head cracked open so it will expand enough for her brain to enlarge. Also, my niece is in ICU in Charleston with dehydration and some other things, and keep her in your prayers.
All right.
Mark, I'd like for the church to remember my whole family and to remember Dr. Pfizer and the entire Pfizer family.
All right. Ronnie?
Remember me and my family, remember my two brothers, my daughter Jeannie and my son Kenny.
Donna?
Remember Berkeley, she's trying to knock this in.
All right.
Jamie said, please remember her and Marvin, they'll be flying in Tuesday, I think. And also my family, my nephew has been on the prayer line, he needs our prayers. His mother is also in ICU on ventilator. As of yesterday, she was still on it. I'm assuming she is this morning. Remember her. And most of all, remember their souls. I know he's not a Christian. Him and Randall were born like 11 days apart. And he's really close to me, so that bothers me greatly. Just remember that family if you can.
Okay. All right.
Mark,
Anybody else?
also, let's remember Alice of Groves, that prayer chain that came across yesterday, and that's the green banner.
Hey, Mark, my sister called and asked for the church to put Patricia Belcher on our prayer list. It's some of the things she's with them now. She's been in the hospital for a couple of weeks in Charleston.
All right. As you guys remember, my older brother Kevin, he has prostate surgery May the 9th, and obviously he's worried about it. And then I was talking to one of my neighbors yesterday, a couple of years older than me, a young guy, and but he found out he's got a couple of blood clots, and he's had heart issues for a few years. So remember him if you would also, please. Anybody else with a spoken request?
Still remember Buddy and Georgia Freeman and her sister, our nation, our missionaries, our law enforcement, Russia and Ukraine, and I still have two sisters that need prayer, and haven't been spoken.
Mason.
Mark, we always desire your prayers. We still have unsaved loved ones. We got some of the family will be traveling out today. Some of them will be traveling back in. So we'd ask you to just keep all of those in your prayers for safe travel mercy. Jennifer Meadows, let's keep her uplifted in our prayers. And again, Wyatt and Kaylee and Jesse.
Anybody else? All right, I'm sure everyone has unspoken prayers. Let's all stand if you would, please. Brother Mason, do you mind leading us this morning?
Heavenly Father, thank you this morning, Lord, for this day that you've given us. Thank you, Lord, for this opportunity, blessing that you've given us to be in your house. Father, we just ask you to forgive us for our sins and our shortcomings. Forgive us where we fail not just you, but each other so often. So we just ask you to be with us throughout the Sunday school hour. God,
No, Bruce is not here this morning, but I'll ask anyway if anyone's got a verse or a passage you'd like to share with the rest of us. Always try to encourage everybody to do that. All right, we'll go ahead and get into our lesson, and the title of it is When There Is No King. We're still in the book of Judges, 17th chapter this morning, assuming I studied the correct lesson. We're on page 36 in the booklet. I'm going to start out this lesson by reading a verse that isn't part of our text, but it is part of this chapter, okay? It's one of those verses that gets skipped over on this, and it just kind of stood out to me this morning when I was just kind of finalizing the notes and everything, and I thought this would be good to mention. It says in chapter 17 and verse 6, it says, "In those days there was no king in Israel, but every man did that which was right in his own eyes." I want us to think about that as we go through this lesson this morning. The period of the Judges, which we're studying right now and have been for the last several weeks, was probably one of the darkest eras in Israel's history. And as usual, it was of their own doing, right? It always is. They had failed to do as God instructed them, and they did not remove all of the people, the previous inhabitants of the promised land. He had delivered them from their bondage through the wandering through the wilderness and finally came in to the promised land, but they had certain things that they were supposed to do. There were people there, right? They didn't necessarily want to go, but God said, get them out. Get rid of them, all of them. They all need to go. They didn't do that. Anytime you don't do as God would have you do, you're automatically asking for trouble. And they found it over and over and over again. So the result of all of that, leaving people behind, was this kind of blending of their faith in God and idolatry and paganism of the other nations that were left in the land. Does that stuff mix very well? It's kind of like, when you try to mix oil with water, it just doesn't work, does it? So what happens is, of course, they thought, well, we are here in the name of the Lord. He's delivered us. He brought us here. We have every right to be here. No, we didn't kill everybody. No, we didn't push everybody out. They're all going to convert. That doesn't work out very well either, does it? So instead of converting those that they mingled with, they ended up trying to live a watered-down form of Judaism. There was a whole lot of the Jewish law and all of this, plus let's mingle in some of this stuff from these nations that we're cohabiting this land with, right? So if you remember, previously, God's people, God's nation had always been led, or mostly led, by strong, godly men, right? When they got delivered from bondage, Moses, the leader of the Jews, they had, and then after him, they had strong leaders all the time, but they were godly men for the most part, all of those leaders down the road there, right? And they kept the nation centered on the things of God. Right? So it wasn't all this outside influence. It wasn't this. It's like, no, this is what we're doing. This is who says to do it. That's what we're going to follow. These are the laws. These are the statutes, the commandments that we follow. Period. This is it. Things, for the most part, went well until they kind of got lax and they let things slip in. But this time it's just gotten really bad. Everything is just all mixed in. But at this time of this writing, there just wasn't any leaders like that. Now, we've been studying about the various judges throughout, and some of them were pretty godly people. They were flawed people. Some of them were not godly at all, but they were a series of judges that led the nation. It wasn't their best time. It wasn't the greatest time in Israel's nation. This is not one of those we're all going to walk away happy and feeling good after this lesson, by the way, in case you haven't picked up on that already. This is a kind of a dark story. I really wasn't familiar with all this when I first started studying this lesson. But now, so there wasn't any kind of leader. So as this verse reads, they were all just kind of winging it, weren't they? They were doing right. Every man was doing what he thought was right in his own eyes. That's going to work out wonderful, isn't it? This mix of Judaism and idolatry was a whole lot like going to a buffet. You think about this. You know, you go down the buffet line. Anybody ever been to one of these big, my company, the company I work for, is based out of Louisiana. So anytime you go to Louisiana, Mississippi, you end up in a casino somewhere. That's where we used to have these big user conferences and user groups. And the hotel rooms are cheap because they want to get your money into casinos, right? But all these casinos have one thing in common. They all have these great big buffets. All the time you're going to have a buffet, right? So if you want all kinds of different ethnic cuisines, breakfast, dinner, whatever. So you think about going through a buffet line and you've got your plate. So I'm going to have a little bit of this. I'm going to take a little bit of that over here. And, let's throw in some of this over here. Looks great, doesn't it? But think about that as far as what these people were doing in this time, thinking of it in those same terms of a buffet. Okay, I'm going to try some of this, and I'm going to try a little bit of that, and I'll throw in some of this God stuff over here. It's all just going to work out great. It doesn't work out great. You can't do it like that. That's not what following God is like. So imagine, just like the big buffet setting, if everybody's doing what's right in their own eyes, does anybody's plate look the same? No, because what looks right in my eyes is not going to look anything like what Charles would see, or Donna would see, or Debbie would see. All of our plates are going to look a little bit different, aren't they? What kind of a system is that? So they're doing all this, and they've got a little bit of this idolatry and this stuff over here, and they worship this God, and they did this, and they did things like this. Oh, but I'm still a godly person because I'm a Jew, so I've kind of got the upper hand on everybody. That was kind of the attitude that they had for a long time. So just like that buffet plate all looks different, so do all of their religious lives. They were all over the place. Everybody was going around and they're making decisions based on, their upbringing as a Jewish person, a child of God, and then they've got mixed up with this nation over here and their idols, their gods, and you just start sprinkling a little bit of all this stuff in there, and pretty soon you're just way off track, right? But they kind of had the attitude, that's okay, I'll be all right because I'm a descendant of Abraham, so I've got this, right? And that's kind of the attitude they had, and that's what kept them in trouble for so long. Now, everybody's religious plate is totally different from everybody else's. All of their moral compasses are different from everybody else's. What's okay, what's not okay, how can I live, what can I get away with, what do I need to stay away from? Have I painted the picture here? It's just a mess. So as that verse said that I read, it says everybody is doing what is right in their own eyes. What's wrong with that? On the most fundamental level, if everybody's doing right doing what is right in their own eyes, what's the very basic problem with all that?
You're not doing what's right in God's eyes.
Okay, thank you. It means that everyone is right. No one is wrong. Do we see that today? Oh my goodness. When you read this stuff, this is why I sit, and I know I say this every time I stand up here. I'm not even going to apologize for it anymore. It is so important for us to study Israel, the history of Israel, on how to lead our lives, how not to lead our lives, how to stay away from things. We look at what's going on today in our lives. It's exact same thing. And not only is it the same as what they did, but it seems to have really been amplified over the last few years. Everything from gender stuff, sexual practices, destruction of public property, peaceful protests, all in the name of righteousness. Everybody's right? Everybody. They can't all be right. Those things that I just mentioned, things that cause people to get off their butts and out in the streets, and we're going to raise up arms and we're going to fight over this and all this stuff, but they're not all fighting for the same thing, are they? Everybody's got something different, but everybody's right. And that means everybody's wrong, right? So that's okay. I'm Christian too, so it's okay for me to do all those things and fight about all those things. And you do hear that. You hear Christian people saying, that's okay, this is okay, we can do this, we can do that. And believe me when I say Christian people, not to be offensive, but I've used that term very loosely for somebody that fights for some of the things that we see being fought for, because it doesn't follow the Word of God. But this is the kind of mix-up, this is the kind of mess that you end up with when everybody is marching to the beat of their own drum, everybody's right, everything's okay, but I'm still a godly person, right? Something blowing up? All right, thank you. All right, so I guess the only comfort that we can take from this mix of God and idolatry is we didn't make this mess. It started a long time ago, right? When you look back at the history of God's people, we're going to blame it on them. They kind of created this mess. So in today's lesson, we're going to read about a few people who are all kind of off kilter with this way of thinking, all right? I think everybody in this story, in this account that we're going to study this morning, is just a little bit off in their way of thinking, and this mix of being a godly person, I keep wanting to say Christianity, but obviously this was before Christ, Judaism, we'll say, and all the things in the world around them, all right? So let's read it, and then we'll go back and talk about the verses that we read over, and I encourage anybody, if you've got anything you want to add to the discussion as we go through here, don't be bashful. All right, so we start in, this is Judges chapter 17. We start in verse 2, and we're going to read through 12. We skip over a couple of verses. We'll talk about, we've already read one of them, but we'll talk about another one as we go through. All right, in verse 2, he says, "And he said unto his mother, the 1,100 shekels of silver that were taken from thee, about which thou cursedst, and spakest of also in mine ears, behold, the silver is with me. I took it. And his mother said, Blessed be thou of the Lord, my son."
And when he had restored the 1,100 shekels of silver to his mother said, I am wholly dedicated to the silver unto the Lord from my hand for my son, to make a graven image and a molten image. Now therefore I will restore it unto thee.
Yet he restored the money unto his mother, and his mother took 200 shekels of silver, and gave them to the founder, who made thereof a graven image and a molten image, and they were in the house of Micah.
And there was a young man at Bethlehem, Judah, of the family of Judah, who was a Levite, and he sojourned there.
And the man departed out of the city from Bethlehem, Judah, to sojourn where he could find a place, and he came to Mount Ephraim, to the house of Micah, as he journeyed.
And Micah said unto him, Whence comest thou? And he said unto him, I am a Levite of Bethlehem, Judah, and I have sojourned where I find a place.
And Micah said unto him, Dwell with me, and be unto me a father and a priest, and I will give thee 10 shekels of silver by the year, and a suit of apparel, and thy victuals. So the Levite went in.
And the Levite was content to dwell with the man, and the young man was unto him as one of his sons.
And Micah consecrated the Levite, and the young man became his priest, and was in the house of Micah. Amen. All right. All kinds of strange stuff in this account. So verse 1, which we did not read, introduces us to Micah, who lives at Mount Ephraim, if I'm saying that properly. And I'll just go back and read that verse 2 again. It says, And he said unto his mother, The 1,100 shekels of silver that were taken from thee, about which thou cursest, and spake of also in my ears, behold, the silver is with me. I took it. And his mother said, Blessed be thou of the Lord, my son. So think about what's going on here. Apparently this guy still lives with mom. We don't know how old he is, but he has sons of his own. I just see this guy sitting in his sweatpants down in mom's basement playing video games. He's probably 40 years old or so. I don't know. We don't have that problem today, do we? You know, I read stuff like this. I see stuff like that, and I think, you know, my number one goal when I got out of high school was to get out of my house, out of my parents' house. And apparently, and I know I've told y'all this before, apparently that was my mother's goal also. Because when I turned 18 and it was time to graduate, my graduation present from my mother was a set of luggage. And she said, now you don't have to use it today, but you will be using it. Yes, ma'am. God rest her soul. So, you know, this guy lives with his mother. So we didn't invent that also. And we see that Micah, being a good son, has stolen money from his mother. 1,100 shekels of silver. Now, I did not do the research to look at how much a shekel was or what a shekel is. I'm assuming it's some kind of a coin or token or whatever it is. But he has stolen 1,100 shekels of silver from his mother that she's been talking about. She's been talking about this money, but he took it. Maybe that's why he took it. But at least he was honest enough to come clean about it. What a guy, right? Lives with mom, took mom's, for all I know, you know, maybe she's supporting the family. I don't know. We don't know that part of it. But, you know, he's hid and living in the same house with his mother. He takes his mother's money. He's got sons also that we find out later in this account. And he takes her money. He comes clean about it. Now, we can see in this verse that she has been talking about having this money, so he just helped himself to it. Her response, now tell me, if your kid came to you, your 40-year-old kid, we'll say he's 40, comes to you and says, hey, Mom, Dad, I took your $1,100. Oh, bless you are, son. That is not going to be my response. Okay? Yeah, I'll take my money back, but I'm not giving you any blessings for it, right? So she says, her response was, blessed be thou of the Lord, my son. It sounds a little odd to us to thank someone for giving you back your own stuff that they stole while they live with you. I'm not thanking them.
Probably while he's living in the basement, she never did any.
Probably so. She never taught him how to leave, did she? All right, so that's what's going on all in verse 2, right? So in verse 3, it says, and when he had returned the 1,100 shekels of silver to his mother said, this is very telling about her character, okay? She's a very devout woman, you can tell here. I had wholly dedicated the silver unto the Lord from my hand for my son, to make a graven image and a molten image. Now, therefore, I'll give it back to you. Anybody doing that?
Not this week.
Nope. So once he gives her the money back, she claims, hey, son, that's great. You know what? I had set aside this money for you to make a graven image and a molten image. Got to be so proud. So she's given that money back to her son, the thief. Do you think God was pleased with any of this whole transaction? Why not?
Well, she said she dedicated it to the Lord
For
her son to make a graven image. So that's sort of a...
kind of cancels out, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Let's all read commandment number 2. Thou shalt not worship any graven image. God doesn't want us doing that. We're not... Go ahead, Luke.
And for a point of reference, that's $12,000 to $13,000 in today's time.
Okay, thank you. All right. All right.
You built a lot for $12,000 to $13,000.
Yeah. So I'm pretty sure that God was... There's not really much of God in that transaction. I don't care how much you say, I've dedicated this to the Lord so that my son could make a graven image and a molten image. Because God has expressly told his people, don't do that. You're not to do that. You know what? Maybe there's nothing wrong in the thing itself, but if it causes you to worship that in place of God, you're in trouble already. Period. You've just created your own idol. I don't have to follow God now. I got this statue, this graven image, molten, whatever shape or form it was, and we don't know, and it doesn't matter. It wasn't right. That's not what God would have us to do. So her opinion apparently was, but that's okay. It's for God. These people are so far off the tracks as we go through this, and this is the danger, again, of what they were talking about in that verse 6, about everybody doing what's right in your own mind, letting, your faith in God get so watered down with the effects of the things around us. And when I say idols, it doesn't have to be this little statue, this little God. It could be anything that takes the place of God in our lives, okay? That's an idol. That's idolatry. So we needn't necessarily think in terms, our minds instantly go to, because we're very visual, to little statues of Buddha and this and that. And obviously that's an idol, but that's not the only idols that we have to face or that we have to contend with as we grow, right?
Question. If you don't pray to those things, are they good, bad, or indifferent as far as having them sitting on your whatnot shelf?
I think it's just a thing. If it's not, doesn't have that kind of meaning to me, and I'm not, I don't place any other than a piece of artwork, because we all have artwork that we can appreciate. And if that's all you look at it as, now I wouldn't want a statue of Satan on my mantle or anything like that, but no, yeah. So, again, this is one of the big problems with mixing the things of God with idolatry and paganism. All right, so you can see this. They're clearly, son feels comfortable taking this money from mom. Oh, but mom, here, I'll give it back to you. No, son, you can have it back because I wanted you to do this with it, and it's all for the Lord. They're mixed up. You might think that and again, here's what happens in our minds. We think we're doing it for the right purpose, right? But that's not always the case. We may think that, but we can never forget what God said about it, right? Even if in our minds we think we're doing it for the right purpose, it is fundamentally wrong because God said don't do that. God said don't. That should be enough for us.
Mark?
Yes.
I wonder how 1100 went in the turned into 200.
Oh yeah, she had to hang on to a little bit of it.
She had totally dedicated to 1100 shekels of silver. But now when it come down to it, she only give up 200.
Well, she needed a new dress too. No, I don't know. That's right. All right, so in verse 4, the story gets even weirder, as Ronnie has talked about already. Yet he restored the money up to his mother. So he gives it back to her again. And his mother took 200 shekels of silver and gave them to the founder, who made thereof a graven image and a molten image, and they were in the house of Micah. So I guess they kind of go back and forth with this a little bit. He stole it from her, he gives it back to her, she insists he takes it back, and then he gives it back to her again. Mom must have been very determined to have a graven image and a molten image, period. She was determined she was going to do that. So out of the 1100, she took 200 shekels of silver and gave to the founder to make a graven image and a molten image, which he did, and it was placed in they call it the house of Micah, but I don't know if it's Micah's house, mom's house, whatever. They lived together. But he had these images placed in his house. Does anybody know what a founder is? Gave it to the founder? Yeah, we would think of it as, so to them it was a goldsmith. We would look at it as like a jeweler or somebody that takes metal and melts it down and creates whatever out of it. So that's what he did. He created these things, puts it in Micah's house, this graven image and molten image, and now this is in Micah. So it's all in the same place. We'll come back to that here in just a minute. So then we skip over verses 5 and 6, and we pick back up in 7. And it says, I'm going to read verses 7 and 8 together. It says, and there was a young man of Bethlehem, Judah, of the family of Judah, who was a Levite, and he sojourned there. And the man departed out of the city from Bethlehem, Judah, to sojourn where he could find a place, and he came to Mount Ephraim, to the house of Micah, as he journeyed. All right, so in verse 5, I'm going to go back, and I'm just going to kind of recap that verse. We see that Micah, who also has sons, also had in his house various idols and religious items from whatever. It doesn't just say they were Judaism or Jewish items. He's got all kinds of different things. He's got, some of the things are from Judaism, like the whatever they call let me go back here, the ephod and the teraphim, things like that, which were the gowns and the robes of what the priests would wear. But he also had idols. He also had this. And apparently he's got like a religious room. Think of it as a little trophy room in his house. I guess his little man cave or whatever, where he sits in mom's basement and plays his video games. I don't know. But he's got these statues. He's got all these little religious things that he collects. And it says also, so he's got some sons that live there also. We don't know much about them. But he had also consecrated or set aside one of his sons to serve as his own personal priest. That's not the way God did that back then, is it? Did you get to select who the priest was? No, that God did that. God said the priests come from this tribe. That's the priests, right? He was very clear about that. So this guy, Micah, again, mixing whatever background of Judaism he had with all the surrounding idolatry and all this stuff around him. It's just a hodgepodge of stuff all over the place. So while that's going on, and he talks about that in verse 5. So meanwhile, now we're introduced to another young person, this young man from Bethlehem, who had set out on a journey. And this guy he was from the tribe of Judah, and he was a Levite. Levite is what? They're the priests, right? That was he had set that tribe aside to be the temple priests, right? So this guy was a Levite. So this young man had set out from Bethlehem and would stay wherever he was welcome. He's out journeying. You can almost look at him as like he's leading some kind of a missionary lifestyle. He goes out and he's going to stay with whoever will welcome him. It doesn't say he was out spreading the word of the Lord or anything like that. It just says he would just go and stay wherever he was welcome. It's kind of what he did. And by chance, he came to stay at the house of Micah, the collector of all things religious. Doesn't this sound like a train wreck in the making already? I mean, the mom is kind of out there. Micah is obviously way out there. And now we have this young man, this Levite, happens to stumble onto this little house of horrors. And now I think he's getting ready to be part of the religious collection, right? So if we look at verse 9, it says, And Micah said unto him, Whence comest thou? And he said unto him, I am a Levite, of Bethlehem, Judah, and I go to sojourn where I may find a place. So Micah asked him where he was from. He told him where he was from. He was a Levite, and he's just looking for the place. You know, when you read that, and you just start thinking about what Micah has been like, what we know about him so far, I bet he must have felt some kind of joy when he was introduced to this young man. Oh, looky, another religious item for my trophy room here. This is great. And that's about what he did here. So in verse 10, And Micah said unto him, Dwell with me, and be unto me a father and a priest, and I will give thee 10 shekels of silver by the year, and a suit of apparel, and thy victuals. And the Levite went in. Now we know something about the Levite, right? Micah has a proposition for the guy. Hey, you know what? Why don't you live with me? You can be my own personal priest, because remember, Micah had appointed his son or consecrated his son to do this before. But now he's got a real priest, a Levite. And he wants him to be his own personal priest. But he's going to sweeten the pot just a little bit, and he offers him money. He's going to throw in 10 shekels of silver, going to show in some clothing, going to give him the victuals, the robes and the gowns and all the ornamentation and all that the priests would normally wear, when they're conducting, whatever ceremony. And for some reason, this Levite thought this was a good idea. He said, okay, I'll do that. Do you think God was happy with that whole situation? No. Probably not. All right, let's look at the last couple of verses here. And the Levite was content to dwell with the man, and the young man was unto him as one of his sons. And Micah consecrated the Levite, and the young man became his priest and was in the house of Micah. So our text, rather strangely, ends with this Levite being, and I'm not saying that the word of God is strange, the account is what's strange, but I think it really shows a lot of things that we need to look out for. Being content to live in Micah's house, serving as a personal priest, being treated like one of Micah's own sons, because it said he consecrated him, he treated him like he was one of his own sons. Just one more trophy for him. And he's been consecrated by Micah, set aside for that, and that's the way he's going to live. Now, I'll say this, there's more to, and that's where our text ends for today. There is more to this story, and there's more weirdness involved in all of this. If you go on and you read in chapter 18, I don't know if that's part of your lesson next week or not, I didn't look ahead. But there's more that happens with this, and this priest and Micah get involved in more. That's not the end of their story for them. And again, just more. It goes on if you get kind of nosy and want to read ahead in his story, and I certainly encourage everybody to do that. If you look at that, there's a continued mix of God's people, these godly people, mixing the things of God with the idolatry and the paganism of the people around them, that it just gets worse and worse and worse. Again, this is just a real dark time for Israel. This whole period of the Judges was just not a good time for the nation of Israel. So, while this is a bit of a dark story from the history of Israel, I think that there's something that we can really take from this. Now, the focus that we've been looking at is this focus on mixing things of God with idolatry. And obviously, that's one sin. Idolatry is one sin among many, right? But it could be applied to any sin. You think about this. We can never mix the things that God would have us to do or not do with our carnal desires. And that's what Micah was doing, right? Claiming to be a godly person, looking like a godly person maybe, willing to steal from his mother, willing to put together graven images, willing to hire his own little personal priest to have, and these things. That's really not, those things are not like what's in Jewish law. That's not the things that God instructed his people to do. We can't mix those things. So instead of living with this attitude that whatever is right in my eyes, and that's a danger when I talked about any sin, and we do this a lot. All right, I'll step back. I do this a lot. I won't drag any of you down with me. You get involved in one little thing. You let one little thing slip into your life. I'm okay. I don't think God's going to be upset with that. It should be all right if I do this, a little of that, something. It's not really taking over my life. I'm a Christian. I go to church. I pray to God. I do this. But I've let some things come in that shouldn't be there, right? Which is what Micah did, which is what his mother did, which is what the Levite did. All of these things. These are supposedly godly people on the surface that let otherworldly things, influences, whatever of that nature, kind of come into their lives. They never mix. It's like oil and water. It does not mix together. Instead of having the attitude of doing what is right in our eyes, which is the way we look at life, it's okay with me, it's right to me, I don't think that's that big of a deal. We need to strive every single day of doing what is right in the eyes of God. You know what? If we're looking like that, there's a far less likelihood of letting the other stuff in, right? Of getting mixed up with the other stuff, because it only takes a little bit. What's the old, there's a verse about a little leaven, leaveneth the whole loaf, right? All of it's gone.
I know you're running out of time, but you bring to mind individual birthdays, Christmas and Easter. If you go back and research their origin, they were pagan holidays that the Christians adapted.
Sure.
So your opinion? Not to put you on a hot seat.
I don't think that we celebrate the holiday the same as they did. Like Easter was actually celebrated, to celebrate Diana, the goddess of birth and new life and this stuff. Yeah, and we don't look at it like that. We call it what they called it, and as far as Christmas, and again, I think it's what's in your mind, that Christmas holiday. I don't think our Christmas looks maybe secularly it does, looks a whole lot like the pagan version of what Christmas was, but I don't think in most of our homes it looks like that very much. That's my opinion.
I've even heard birthdays criticized because you're taking the limelight from God and putting it on.
I think all of y'all should celebrate my birthday. And I take cash. So, no, I'm not trying to make light of what you're saying. I understand what you're saying.
I celebrate these things, don't get me wrong.
Right, yeah.
I'm just saying,
yeah.
I've known the origin and how it's gotten mixed and blended with what you're saying today.
Right, yeah. If we are forgetting to look at things through the eyes of God and looking at things merely through our own eyes, how I want things to be, what I think is right, what I think is wrong. If I'm trying to live my life by my own moral compass, I'm always going to fail every single time. Anytime I think there's some question, some conflict, some nudging of the Holy Spirit, I'll take a step back and say, what would God have me do right now? It kind of made me think about that. Everybody wore the bracelets for so many years ago, the WWJD, what would Jesus do? Not necessarily a bad thought, right? I thought it got to be a little commercial, but it's the same sentiment, yes. All right. I appreciate it, everybody. I'm done. I'll shut up.